but that's okay. We got a lot to talk about.
Okay. And I'm going to, even though you and I talked about this a little bit the other day, I have forgotten some of what you told me. So I'm going to, it'll be a surprise to me too.
We are at that age, Kirk.
Yep, that's right. We are. The good thing is you're the subject matter expert. So there you
We
go.
try.
And I see that we're streaming here. So we're live. This is the part that gets cut out, when we post the show, or at least it's supposed to get cut out. That's what Suncast is supposed to do. He's done a great job so far, but there's no guarantees. We'll share. Cut out the whole thing. No, man. All right, let me go over to my profile. Share this thing out. Hello. All right. Hey, everybody on the network. Glad you're here. We are getting ready to do TWiRT. Just getting the distribution model set up here. Our guest is an old friend. He's old and he's a friend.
There we go. And I also need to get better lighting in here, because then the camera will actually focus properly. What a country.
Tom Ray. There we oops. How many Tom Rays are? I hope that one's you. Okay, I just tagged you.
Excellent.
And
by the way, several state associations will be sending out links to this podcast after we do this to talk about their ABIP programs.
Oh, okay. And the usual practice is sometime tomorrow, depending on how quick I am. Suncast turns it around pretty quickly, but he'll have the permanent links to where the show resides.
Right. So yeah, after I get that, I'll send it out.
Yeah. Wait till tomorrow, and I'll send you the links. Let's see, one more share, and that's going to go to. Let me get back to my page. Man, when you're old, it's hard to multitask. Did you know that? At least it is for me. Share this out to the Broadcasting Club. And we'll see if we can tag you there too.
Yeah, I'm part of it, so you should be able to.
All right. We are a minute away from the top of the hour now. So get back on the right page.
Top of the podcast.
That's right. All right, let me get a little bit more information popped up here. There we go. Okie dokie. It is top of the hour. Suncast, are we 100% ready? Are you ready? Got your fingers on the buttons? All right. Hey, everybody. Glad you've joined us on the network here. It is 5 o'clock on the East Coast and 2 o'clock on the West Coast, and wherever you are in between. I'm Kirk Harnack, and we are getting ready to do This Week in Radio Tech. It's our 713th episode. I can't believe I'm still alive and here. Isn't that fantastic? This is the part of the show that we cut out. So this is the part of the show where we can cut up. Here we go. Get comfortable. Make sure I've got my lemonade. Make sure, I should make sure my phone is dimmed. There we go. All right, here we go. Let's start the show in 3, 2. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to that light bulb at the top of the tower. Hello, I'm Kirk Harnack. I am in my office and studio, the Telos Alliance studio in Nashville, Tennessee, on this beautiful Thursday. Actually, it's been a little rainy here today. We needed the rain. We got some rain here today, so good. I won't have to water my wife's flower bed this evening. And this is the show where we talk about lots of radio things, radio engineering. Sometimes we go a little afield from radio engineering, but today it's right down the line, radio engineering. And our guest today is a longtime friend of the show. In fact, he was one of the original co-hosts of the show. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put your hands together for Tom Ray. Hello, Tom. Welcome in. Good to see you, man.
Glad to be here, Kirk. It's always good to be here. It's good to be someplace in my age.
Am I correct that it's been 15 years since we started this show? Almost 15 years to the day. I guess maybe a month or two from now it'll actually be 15 years. You were one of the original co-hosts.
Yes, and I think we did. I did over 300 shows with you. You,
wow.
Chris Tobin, me, and we added Chris Barr.
Wow. And well, what happened? Did I piss you off and you left, or why did we end up with fewer co-hosts?
Well, I ended up starting my own business, and I just I couldn't be in. I couldn't say, Kirk, I'll be in a given place at this given time, so I could be on the show. Yeah. I never knew really what I was getting into, where I was going to be, and I just decided, you know what? Let's just back out for now, and that way there's no issues.
And, back then, it seems like we often did the show in the evening, like at 7 o'clock, maybe 7 Eastern time. And I think you were home by then. You usually took the train home from being in the city, right?
No, actually, I drove home. I used to drive into the city every day, primarily because if I needed to go to the transmitter site, the train didn't go to the transmitter site. And very bluntly, you're talking New York, you're talking New Jersey, and if I had to get out there, I could take a train to Secaucus and then take a cab, and the cab drivers would generally look down this road in the swamp and go, "No, we're not taking you down there." We'll end up like Jimmy Hoffa, and
Well, nowadays Uber and Lyft have a lot of options. There's the X and there's the XL and there's the ride share and there's the black car and there's the gray car. They ought to have like an Uber 4x4 option, an Uber 4-wheel drive option.
Well, that wasn't the problem. They were afraid that, we're disappearing into the swamp and they'd never come out again.
Oh.
Not with the car. They'll end up like Jimmy Hoffa.
I was afraid you were going in that direction.
Stadium,
Gosh. Well, when you hung out your shingle some years ago, Tom Ray Consulting, you've had a ton of clients. You've done a ton of projects. I mean, it's like you've lived a whole nother career doing that. But you've been involved with something called the Alternative Broadcast Inspection Program. And that's what we're here to talk about, because there's been some changes, and you've been a major part of standard setting for that. Give us a little taste of what we're going to be talking about today.
Well, the Alternative Broadcast Program was put together, and it was a partnership between the Broadcasters Associations and the FCC, to kind of cut down the workload on the FCC a little bit. So, what the association would do, they'd hire someone like myself, or if you were going to get into it, Kirk, they could hire you, who knew the rules, who could kind of follow things and not be persuaded, and knew right from wrong when it came to the engineering stuff. And we went, I started with New York, and then I was contacted by, let's see, there's actually a group. They run Washington, D.C., Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, North Carolina, and Iowa. And I got involved with them, and then got involved with Iowa when they picked up Iowa. And there have been some changes to the program. In the past, the commission would guarantee that they wouldn't knock on the door of your radio station if you passed the ABIP. Well, right now, we're in a little bit of a flux. Because the public file is online, because we also go through the public file. But because the public file is online, we can no longer certify the public file, because the FCC has said, it's nice if you guys get it certified, but we reserve the right to look whenever we want. So,
sure.
So what we do is we look through the public file and go, Kirk, you got this problem here. You really need to fix it. But it doesn't affect the outcome of the ABIP. And I've been involved with the SBE. Um, over the last, oh gosh, must be the last year, we've we've rewritten the AM, the FM, and the television checklists. The FCC used to have, the self inspection checklists out. Um, we are we are working on the translator and the booster for both television and radio right now, and we're working on what may turn into a certification level for ABIP inspectors. Because
Oh,
part of
really?
the
Oh,
well,
hmm.
part of the problem the FCC had with the program was that if I go in and inspect a station, and Kirk goes in and inspects a station, we both do it a little bit differently, and maybe interpret a rule a little bit differently, and maybe give a wink wink and a nod nod, and let something by that's marginal but really shouldn't be go through. And that's what the FCC had a problem with. So we're putting together standards for the inspectors.
Yeah.
And I can give you a couple of examples of that.
Well,
I
tell you
went,
what, let me pause you, and we're gonna, because that's going to be the meat and the potatoes of our discussion. And I think you may have we may have to keep the call letters silent, but you've got a
of
story or
course,
two about different inspectors having different standards, and you can
yeah,
only imagine. I can imagine that you've been told by a station owner, well, the last guy didn't have a problem with that, so we're gonna
yeah. And of course, then my
we
response is, I'm not the last guy.
yeah. I'm not the last guy. Tom, our show is sponsored in part by Nautel, and I want to remind everybody this is a good idea here. Well, Nautel's a good idea. I mean, I personally own several Nautel transmitters, and I'm sure Tom has taken care of or installed quite a few himself. But Nautel is really trying to help stations get behind the HD radio bandwagon. Hey, it's been out for over 20 years now, and doing well in some markets, and it doesn't do well where people don't do it, and because of our constantly fragmented audiences and fragmented the alternatives that people have to tune into. For example, I just bought a used vehicle for my wife, and it came with a 3-month Sirius XM trial, and it doesn't have HD radio in it. It's frankly it's an 11-year-old car. It's a Nissan Pathfinder, and but it does come with Sirius XM. Well, we want people to get in their car, turn on their radio, and see the kind of benefits that you get with HD radio. You get, of course, title and artist, but you can get that with FM RDS, but you can also get the album art and other artwork. And with this new EAS at the Edge idea, a combination of technologies and techniques from some companies like Nautel, you can get even useful information on your dash about weather and other emergencies. Well, what's Nautel doing about this? They're doing this HD radio test drive, and it's not free. You still got to have some stuff, but they've been able to shave the cost significantly for you to try out HD radio on your station. It's the whole idea here is that you can see what potential HD radio has in your market. You can get your salespeople to sell it. You can promote it. You can find out maybe some formats that you can get out there. Maybe you've got a Hispanic community that is now in the area that wasn't there 10 years ago. Or like here in Nashville, we not only have a burgeoning Hispanic community, we've also got a lot of folks from East Africa who are here. And my goodness, I'm sure that I know that they don't have an over-the-air radio alternative. Somebody in Nashville needs to do an HD station that caters to that community. There's got to be something, or maybe just a format. Maybe you want to be competitive with somebody across town. Well, this HD radio test drive is what you want to do. What do you need? Well, you need to lease or purchase a Nautel transmitter, and it needs to be a GV2, or if you have a GV transmitter, you can upgrade it to a GV2. And the reason is the GV2 has the hardware built in to run the software that makes this super easy. There's no more collection of importers and exporters and different boxes that you need to have and coordinate and wire up and lash things together. It's not like that. The GV2 transmitter from Nautel has everything you need. Basically, you run your several different program sources into it, and you turn it on and you transmit HD radio along with your FM from the GV2 transmitter. You can do this, you need an Xperi main station or equivalent license, an assigned trial agreement with Nautel, and then you need to provide some programming. You can do just an HD1, but hey, give this a test drive. Do an HD2, do an HD3. In Oxford, Mississippi, we're doing an alt rock format, which is popular in that college town, but we're also doing an oldies format that sounds great. It's on our HD2, and we're doing an urban AC format called 94.7 The Beat HD3, and that's popular too. So check this out from Nautel. The best way to get informed is to contact your favorite Nautel representative, like Jeff Wilson or Jeff Welton, and find out more about this, or just go to the website at nautel.com. Thanks so much, Nautel, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech and being such a friend to the broadcast industry. All right, we're talking to Tom Ray about the Alternative Broadcast Inspection Program. And Tom, I mentioned in a little promo that no engineer wants to get that phone call. Kirk, this is the front desk. There's a man from the FCC here, and he wants to talk to you. You know, do you have the rest of the day available? Right.
I've had that happen twice in my career.
Really? What was it like? I mean, what's that heart-stopping, blood pressure rising fear like?
Well, one station, another station in town, sent a letter to the commission claiming a bunch of things, several of which there was no way they could have done. Like they claimed our on the AM our base current. This is in the days you had to do base current measurements. They claimed that our base current ratios were out. Well, how would they know? How did they get into our tuning houses? They claimed our monitor points were off. They claimed a lot of things. And this was also in the days when the commission used to be able to come in and, come in and do a proof overnight, audio proof. So they came in overnight and we did an audio proof. And they were great guys.
Wow.
I mean, they were very nice. They were looking for something. They had something they were looking at. And they didn't find anything. And they kind of apologized and was like, yeah, let's go for breakfast. The other station, I was actually across town. I had a Harris MW5A transmitter, and the night before it exploded. Tube shorted in the PDM stage, the modulator tube, and it took out a bunch of stuff in the PDM. So I was over at a station across town going through their parts box going, okay, I kind of need this and I kind of need that. And the pager went off and I called in and they said, Tom, the FCC's here. And oh boy.
Oh no.
So
the day just got better or worse.
Yeah. Well, I took him back to the transmitter room and he looked at the AM and I got it. If you're familiar with that transmitter, I had it spread all over the floor. And he went, what happened? I told him, he says, you're kind of busy. He says, let's go look at your FM. And this was the days before internet. And we had just put a brand new FM on the air at a new location. And he's standing there with the license in his hand, looking at the license and looking at the transmitter and looking at the license and looking at the transmitter. And he wrote down the readings and he went, where'd this come from? I said, it's been on the air for 6 months. We've been licensed on it for 6 months. He goes, really? I said, yeah. He says, damn Washington. He says, can you give me a copy of that? Oh, sure.
Oh, geez.
And once again, he was just a great guy. And we talked about numerous things and, they were there to educate. If you don't sit there and try to hide something, and if you're trying to do it right, if they find something, they're going to say, let's just get it fixed. Let's just get it fixed. It's not a big deal. I mean, if it's something, really, really out there and it's really bad, I mean, they're not going to be quite as nice, but as long as you want to learn and as long as, like I said, you don't try to hide anything and you're not lying to them, they're going to treat you very, very properly. They're going to treat you very nicely.
Tom, I got to believe that if inspections were done today, like they were 20, 30, 40 years ago, many, many, many stations would not pass. Or I don't know, it just feels like we're, on the one hand, our equipment is more stable and reliable than it's ever been before. On the other hand, it also sees a lot less of a person making sure it's right. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're not wrong about that at all. Part of the problem, and not to alienate anybody, but not to take anybody off, but a lot of it's station management because, engineering in the transmitter site's something that's out there. It's over there. It's out of sight, out of mind. And, we have other things for you to do. You shouldn't be out there. And
Mm-hmm.
Actually, you should be, especially with an AM. If you have a directional AM, you should be. Um, and that's where people get into trouble. I mean, I can't tell you how many stations I walk into, not only as an ABIP inspector, but just somebody who hires me to come in to do something with the station, and it's like, seriously, dudes, seriously. I mean, I've got to crawl over things to get to the transmitter
Wow.
in
Yeah.
the building.
Yeah.
It's like, no, this isn't right. I can't see the base of the tower because the field is overgrown. That's not right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, so that's kind of the state we're in today. And you're right. Especially with AMs, a lot of AMs wouldn't pass. There are. I've seen fences down. I've seen improper signage on the property. Warning of high voltage at the base, or warning of possible RF radiation exposure, and people just don't put those signs up and don't see why they have to. And it's like, well, wait a minute. First of all, you have to. It's a hazard. Second of all, it's what's required by law. It's in the FCC
Yeah.
rules, so you should do it. I've walked into FM stations, to do an inspection, especially in a larger market, and modulation is 120%. It's like, guys, you need to back it down. While I'm standing here, you need to back it down. What happens when I walk out the door is your business. But in order for me to say you are operating legally, I have to see the modulation at 100% in the case of an FM, or if you're running subcarriers, no more than 110%. And,
Sure. Yeah.
And they said, well, the program director, I don't care about the program director. Turn it down while I'm standing here, because I cannot say that you are operating legally.
And how many program directors really understand the intermediate frequency bandwidth restrictions in typical FM receiver? And is 110 or 120 or 140% modulation really a good idea for your listeners?
Well, probably not, because most radios, if you were to do an experiment, do an experiment this afternoon. Go out to one of your transmitter sites and take a typical car radio, and turn your modulation up to 115%, and tell me how much you'd like to listen to it. Because now you're slamming into the sides of the IF, and you will get distortion, and it's not going to sound right. I mean, I've got a station right now. I'm still waiting for the FCC to come knock on this guy's door. I've got a pirate. He's first adjacent.
Oh.
And granted, we are on the wrong, he is on the wrong side of our antenna. It's a directional antenna. He's on the null side, but still he's in the 60 dBu contour.
Yeah.
And very frankly, with the radios today, I probably wouldn't have known he was there had he not been modulating 300%. I mean, I don't know how anybody can listen to that station, but it's just like, you drive through that area, it's slam, 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 splash, splash, splatter, and it's like, dude, just stop. So
that brings up a question as an ABIP inspector. Well, okay, I'll back up and return to that question later. Right now, are there any qualifications to be an ABIP inspector? And I guess every state that participates, I've got so many questions. Are all 50 states participating with the FCC on this program, or most of them?
I believe that all 50 states are, and the basic qualification, it's up to the state. But what you want is you want somebody who's been in the business a while. You don't want somebody who's been in the business for a year, who thinks they may know what they're doing, and when they actually don't. So you want someone who's got a little seasoning behind them, shall we say?
So apparently, there's a contract, right, between the FCC. There's a contract.
It's a contract between the FCC and the Broadcasters Association. So it's up to the Broadcasters Association right now. What we're doing with the SBE is we are coming up with standards which may become a certification level. Gotcha. So you could possibly become certified as a ABIP inspector, which would tell the Broadcasters Association that, yes, you know what, you are qualified if you could pass the test.
So right now, states like, for example, the state of New York, the Broadcasters Association there has hired you to be their ABIP inspector, and so there's a financial relationship there. The radio station is involved in that financial transaction. They pay for your expenses in travel, and depending on the state, they'll pay you directly for your services, or they may pay through the state association through their dues or whatever. But either way, you or whoever the state inspector is gets paid something for that. It's your time and expertise. Is it how does a state go about making sure they've got somebody who's the right person to be doing this job?
Well, they ask around. In New York, Dave Donovan had asked around to a lot of stations, and he knew me from WOR. This actually all started after Hurricane Sandy.
Mm-hmm.
I ran the SBE chapter in New York City for, I don't know, I think it was 10 years. I was involved with EAS in the city of New York, which really needed somebody to grab it by the lapels and go, okay, we need to get this tamed. And that also led to doing EAS in the state of New York. But he knew who I was. He knew, he'd been to the station before. He had talked to Rick Buckley, God rest his soul. He's passed now. So he knew who I was. And the way I got involved in the other stations, we won't talk about Iowa, but the other states, there were 2 ABIP inspectors that passed. And the state associations didn't know what to do. And one day they were on a conference call with a big television. Oh, well, they weren't on the conference call, but there are several big television groups that do engineering conference calls once a week. And one of the topics that came up was, we can't get our ABIP inspections done. And the guys from New York who were on the call said, we got this guy in New York, Tom Ray. Maybe he'd be interested. Here's his number. Give it to the association. And one day out of the blue, I got a call. And we started talking, and they did some checkups on me, and they called New York, and next thing I know, I'm doing those inspections, and then this group picked up Iowa, and there are actually a couple of us who do Iowa because that's a huge state. You can drive 7 hours and still not reach the border.
Sure,
yeah. But that's interesting because most FM towers are 1,800 to 2,000 feet, and you wait for Jack and the Beans to come down. It's great.
Oh my gosh. Hey, to Tom, it's time to take a quick break here. We're talking to Tom Ray, and we're about to get into what he's been doing lately with setting standards and helping to write these standards for ABIP inspectors. By the way, you fellow engineers, maybe you live in a state where there's an opportunity for you to pick up extra income, or maybe even if you do like Tom does, cover several states, maybe even make it a significant part of your career, or maybe it becomes your career to do ABIP inspections at broadcast stations. So we'll be talking to Tom about that, and I know Tom has a couple of really funny and interesting and maybe sad stories, but Tom handles them with aplomb. It's all coming up. We're doing TWiRT here. It's our 713th episode, and our show is brought to you in part by Broadcast Bionics and this amazing video production system that is practically hands-off called Camera One. Let's check it out.
Camera One from Broadcast Bionics. Designed to bring video to your audio content. Visualizing radio and podcasts for social media. Camera One can automatically create, capture and brand professionally switched video for live streaming or upload, making your production shareable. Control and configure using a web browser on any device. Camera One is available as a 4-camera or 8-camera system using the Blackmagic A10 Mini range, including the A10 Mini Extreme. You can use cameras to suit your studio and your budget. You'll need 1 camera for a studio wide shot and usually 1 camera per microphone. A standard multi-channel sound card or IP driver monitors audio from each studio microphone, and we work natively with Axia systems. Ideally, this will be a post-fader feed from each mic, although you can use pre-fade audio or a mic split if that's all you have available. These audio levels are used to intelligently switch the video feed when each contributor is talking. You can also group microphones together into one shot and use the audio from a mixer's aux bus. You can use Camera One's auto switch feature, or disable it and switch using the on-screen buttons or the buttons on the A10. Recordings can automatically start when you tell the system you're on the air. This on-air indication can be linked to your studio's red lights via IP or an Avantec Adam GPIO interface. You can quickly browse all the videos that have been automatically created during your broadcast, download them and post. Camera One is a user-installable system. You'll need a good spec Windows 10 PC, i7 with plenty of storage and 16 gig of RAM. It's better if this machine isn't used for anything else. Remember, you can control the software in a web browser on another device on your network. Camera One, a thrifty way of creating scroll-stopping video from your show or podcast from Broadcast Bionics.
So cool, Camera One. And there are other products like Caller One or Bionic Table or Virtual Rack, all from the brilliant minds at Broadcast Bionics. They supply some of the biggest broadcasters in the world and small ones too. So whether you're big or small, check them out. The website, bionics.co.uk. Bionics.co.uk. Thanks so much, Broadcast Bionics, and your brilliant minds for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Sponsoring us is one of the most brilliant things you've ever done. We're talking to Tom Ray. He is an alternative broadcast inspector. And that means he runs across some pretty interesting things. Tell you what, Tom, if you could, can you regale us with some interesting story real quick, and then we'll get into the standards setting process that you've been involved with. What's a juicy story?
Well, sure. But before we do that, I just want to say that we're there to help you. When we come in, we're there to help you. And because I've had some people, you walk in and they kind of get a little animosity, and it's like, no. We're not the FCC. We're here to help. We're here to tell you what's wrong, so you don't get that fine.
Obviously, and
it's always good to have another set of eyes on your facility, because you may think you're doing it absolutely right, and you may be real close, but you might not be there. So that's what we do.
Would you rather hear, as a broadcast station owner, would you rather hear, I'm from the FCC and I'm here to help you? Or would you rather hear, hi, I'm Tom from the New York State Broadcasters Association and I'm here to help you stay away from the FCC?
Exactly. But you wanted a story. So I'll tell you this one story. I won't tell you where it was. This station group, I think they had 5 FMs and they had 2 AMs. And the sad thing was, and we had talked before the break about, how some stations just wouldn't pass an FCC inspection. The sad thing was they were trying to do it right, but every site we went to was worse than the last one. The first site had a tube transmitter and the plate voltage meter didn't work. Like, well, okay, how do you tell if the transmitter's on power? Well, what? You got to replace the plate voltage meter. And then we went to another site and the remote control didn't work. It's like, well, you don't have positive control over the station, and that's a violation. You got to get this fixed. And I mean, it was one thing after another. I mean, one site, they were operating at like 80%. I'm looking at the transmitter and it's like, transmitter will do the power. It's a brand new Nautel. Why are you operating at 80%? And the engineer wasn't there. This was the operations manager. He couldn't answer the question. And I said, well, you need to bring the power up. And he was like, well, I kind of don't know how. And well, okay, I'm not going to touch it, but I'm going to tell you how to do it. And he brought it up to like 95%. And I said, okay, you're legal. You're fine. We're good. Mm-hmm. But then we went to their AM site. Ha ha ha. No. And this was unique because they had 2 AMs. They were diplexed, and they were unique in the fact that they both raised their power at night instead of dropping power. So they doubled their power at night.
Okay.
So we go to walk into the building, and the first thing we had to do is we had to cut our way into the building because it was overgrown. And then we got into the building, and then I had to climb over things to get to the transmitters. And they had a nice brand new Nautel transmitter standing there, and I'm kind of looking around the room, and I spotted the DSL modem in the corner that had nothing connected to it and a red light. And I said, okay, transmitter's on power. And I said, how do you do the power change? The guy says, well, the Nautel has an internal scheduler, which is true. That's accurate. And I said, okay, how do you know it did the power change? Well, the remote control tells me. I says, oh. I said, how's the remote control tell you? He's, well, over the internet. I said, really? I said, you mean the internet that's not working? Um, um, I said, by the way, the clock on the transmitter is 20 minutes off.
Oh, no. Mm-hmm.
So then we looked at the other station, which was an Armstrong transmitter, which has no bells and whistles. And they're nice little transmitters. They just has no bells and whistles. And I said, well, how are you doing your power change on this if the internet's not working and the remote control doesn't work? And he says, well, guess I'm not. I said, dude, you're hurting yourself. You can double your power at night.
Mm-hmm.
You can double your power. So at that point, I said, let me just go out to the tower and look at the base current or base currents, because there are two stations involved. And I looked out there and I couldn't see the base of the tower. And
because weeds?
There was a tree this big growing right next to the tower. And I went, dude. And he said, well, our landscaper couldn't make it here. This was, I think, around 2021. He says, our landscaper couldn't make it here because of COVID. I said, dude, trees 4 inches across don't grow in a year.
Yeah.
So eventually he got things cleared out and sent me a picture. I said, okay, I need pictures of the ammeters. He sends me a picture of one ammeter. I'm like, okay, number one, which station? Number two, where's the other ammeter? And sometimes sometimes in diplex situations, there's a third ammeter. I says, I want pictures of the ammeters. Never got them, so needless to say, they didn't get a certification.
Wow.
And actually, the one interesting thing at this station, they the license said they had a Collins antenna for the FM, for the big FM. And I looked up the tower and I'm looking at it and it's like, that's a rototiller. Boy, that looks like an ERI. And the operations manager says, no, it's a Collins. And he told me the history of it. The tower had come down at some point in the late 70s, and they built a new tower, and that had been up there since, I think, 1981, and it's a Collins antenna. I said, okay, as if you don't mind, I'm going to do some research tonight. So I found a Collins catalog from 1980 and 1981, and sure enough, they made a rototiller antenna. So I'm guessing it was a rebranded ERI.
Sure. Yeah. Probably so.
It was, who knew? I mean, really, who knew? So it was like, okay, I'll believe you. It's got to be a Collins. So,
and we totally expected rebranding from the likes of RCA. They had all kinds of people making stuff for them, and they rebranded RCA. But I didn't know that Collins rebranded, because I thought, well, maybe Collins also sold.
Actually, Harris used to rebrand ERI.
Yes, that's right. They did, but they had a little special twist, a little extra twisty to it to make it their exclusive antenna. Yeah,
correct.
Wow.
So,
wow.
And there's there's other things. I mean, there's actually a funny story, and I saw this gentleman the other night at an SBE meeting. I was out in Iowa, and I walk into this transmitter site, and the chief engineer was on the phone, and we waved at each other. And I'm just kind of nosing around and looking around, and I'm looking at this transmitter that they're putting together as an auxiliary, and I'm like, that transmitter looks familiar. I don't know why. And then I saw there was a shipping container on the floor in front of it, so I looked at it, and it had a set of call letters from up here in New York. It's like, oh, okay, I've seen that transmitter several times on ABIP inspections in New York, sitting in a corner. So I called their chief engineer, and I said, stop stalking me.
I've inspected this transmitter before. Yeah.
And then there was the time we came out of the transmitter site in Iowa and had to wait for the cattle to get out of the way, because it was in the middle of a cattle ranch. Little secret: if you just turn the windshield wipers on, they scatter.
Really?
They're afraid of the sound.
No idea.
Neither did I.
Okay, that's pretty interesting.
It's fun because you get to see different places, and you get to see different stations, and you meet new friends. There was another station I had. They had, I'm going to call him a kid, as opposed to me. Everybody's a kid, but I'm going to call him a kid. He was maybe in his late 20s, and he was the chief engineer of the station, and he knew quite a bit about the FM. And we went out to the AM, and I remember the site because the site had Idaho dresser towers, and those are the ones that come down to an apex, which then expand down to a tripod, and they have a unique lattice design. And the first station I worked at had a deco dresser, so I'm kind of partial to them. And they had just been painted, and they were gorgeous. They were absolutely beautiful. And then he started showing me pictures because, the station had neglected the towers for a while, and it was like every flange had at least one bolt missing. So, I mean, these towers were essentially, the steel wasn't brand new, but they were essentially brand new because they'd been gone through. And we went into the building, and his phase angle on one of the towers was a 3-tower directional, and the phase angle was out by a half a degree out of tolerance. And I said, well, you kind of got to pull that back in. And he said to me, I don't know how. Oh, okay, let's commence RF 101. So I taught him how to pull that phase angle back in on his phaser, and we went out and measured monitor points, and everything was in, and he passed, and he did a great job. I mean, he wanted to learn, and that's why we're there. That's what we do with the Alternative Broadcast Inspection Program, because we're putting eyes on things, and if there's something you don't know, we're happy to help. We're happy to tell you, and from our experience and from the FCC rules.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, Tom, let's talk about this. This set of standards that you've been working on, and I guess I got one thing when I was doing a little bit of research for this show, although I left most of this to you. I noticed I came across a self-inspection checklist. Is a self-inspection checklist and what ABIP inspectors have been using, are those similar? Are they related in some way? Or are they the same thing?
They're pretty much the same thing. The FCC for years had a self-inspection checklist.
I remember that.
They had never updated it. And if you can imagine going out and doing an ABIP on a television station, which is now digital, where the checklist is all analog.
Yeah.
I can't ask the guy where's the color burst. How's the relation to the color burst? I can't ask him things like, because it doesn't exist. Except in a digital format, which is not being transmitted. So we can't really ask about that.
Yeah.
So the SBE, we said, we kind of have to put together a checklist for these stations. And the old FCC checklists were, depending on which AM, FM television, were between 12 and 15 pages. Ours are 56.
Whoa.
Because we've added things. Because there are some things that weren't in the FCC self-inspection checklists that come up. For example, wireless mics. Are your wireless mics licensed? They should be. And are they in the right band? They should be. And if they're not licensed, the main reason to license it is if somebody causes you interference on your wireless mic. If you're a television news operation and the guy next door all of a sudden decides he's going to hop on a frequency with a two-way radio and it happens to be where your wireless mics are, if you're not licensed, you have no standing with him. Because you can go knock on the door and say you're interfering with me, and he can go, yeah, it's nice, and slam the door in your face. Where if you show up with your FCC license, he now has to pay attention to you, or the FCC will pay attention to him.
Yeah.
And the problem will be resolved. That's why we license them. We've added questions such as does the station have a valid payola plugola policy? That's something the commission will look at, and we ask to make sure you do. We ask if you have a policy against obscenity and profanity. Station should have that policy, especially a college station. You don't want somebody getting on the air and cursing a blue streak who thinks they have a right to, and they don't, except certain hours. When we go through the public file, like I said, we can't certify it any longer. But when we look through it, we can say, okay, here's where we see a problem, and where I see a lot of problems is stuff that is time sensitive. Like, for example, your issues and programs lists. They have to be in, and that by the 10th of the month in January, April, July, and October. And in the old days, when the public file was on paper, if it wasn't in on the 10th of the month, by the 10th of the month, you could get away with it, because how would I know when I walked in if it was in, it was in the file. So as far as I'm concerned, it was in there. But now it's date stamped and time stamped. You can't get away from that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I had a station at one point, and that's something that's going to hold up your license at license renewal time, which I tell stations, you need to make sure this stuff is done on time. I mean, it's supposed to be on time for a reason, and the public file is there for a reason. Granted, a lot of the public won't know what they're looking at, but this is public information that needs to be there. And I had a station once. I looked through the public file, and two times in like 2 years, one of the months when they were supposed to put the issues and programs list in was put in like 3 weeks late. And I said, well, can you explain this? Yeah, I mean, the only excuse for that is if there's a government shutdown or the FCC website is shut down. And that wasn't the case in this case. Yeah. And they basically said, well, that's when Valerie was on vacation. Valerie does those. I went, oh, yeah, but the rule doesn't say it has to be in by the 10th of this month unless Valerie's on vacation. So Valerie should have either assigned it to somebody or put in what she had before she left and then appended it after the fact. And most lawyers will tell you that's acceptable. And I always tell people, check what I'm saying with your attorney and do what he says, but here's what I see as a problem. And sure enough, I was back at that station 3 years later. They were the only one in town whose license had not been renewed. It was still sitting hung up in the commission, and it was because of that. And the commission fined them $25,000.
Oh my God. Wow.
So, I mean, so they take it seriously. There was another station I went into. Their license hadn't been renewed yet. It was a television station, and everybody else in town had been renewed. Theirs was kind of hanging at the commission. And I found there were like 3 major things missing from the public file. I mean, just gone. They weren't even there. And when I went to the station, I knew the lady at the front desk. I'd been there before, and I said, and I knew she kept the paper public file. I said, can we look in your paper file just to see if it's there and if this was a mistake? And we looked, and she had a backup paper file. It wasn't there either. So this was in the days when the public file was part of the ABI, real part of the ABIP, and I couldn't sign off on the station because of this. So we sat down with the general manager, and I said, got a problem here. And he said, well, let's get our legal counsel online. Well, the legal counsel gets online, and the legal counsel said, note the language here. The legal counsel said, well, I talked to somebody at the FCC, somebody. And it's sitting on somebody's desk. It'll be signed any day now. And I said, well, counselor, that can you send me an email showing me this chain, and then I can sign off on it? And she says, well, no, it was a phone call, so you'll have to take my word. And I said, well, I can't do that because that's called hearsay and it's not admissible in a court of law. Oh, they don't like it when you know the words. She tried to get me fired.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And it was like, seriously? It was like, just, and then 9 months later, I get a call from the chief engineer who said, yeah, we just got the license. So can you sign off on things? Yeah, but it was going to be signed any day now. Any day.
9 months. Wow. Hey, we're talking to Tom, right? Tom, we're going to take a quick break. Tom is an ABIP inspector for 7 states. He's been involved in writing a lot of standards that ABIP inspectors should need to follow. And I want to see what else we have. We've not got too many more minutes left in our program, but I'm sure Tom will have some more information for us in just a minute. Hey, our show is brought to you in part by Broadcasters General Store, BGS. Down in Ocala, Florida. Love these folks. We get our broadcast gear from there, from all my stations, which is soon to be 20 radio stations. Buying some more. Anyway, and they represent Innovonics. Well, they represent lots of companies, but Innovonics has got an amazing new product. It's been out for about a year now, but it's definitely shipping. It's called the Innovonics the Triple Tuner 677. Let's hear about it right now.
The 677 Triple Tuner is a monitor receiver in a compact half-rack package. It has 3 built-in SDR-based frequency agile tuners, each one programmable for AM, FM, or weather band reception. Each receiver has a balanced monaural XLR output to provide audio to an EAS monitor or off-air monitor throughout the broadcast facility. It has self-logging alarms that constantly check for audio loss, low signal, RDS-PI mismatch, and EAS alert tones. Online alarm notifications alert personnel with email or SMS messages. The dynamic web interface provides control and monitoring remotely via any web-enabled device. In addition, the 677 has remote listening available via a web stream. It allows up to 10 simultaneous stream listeners, and SNMP is fully supported. Of course, the most important feature for any radio receiver is its reception quality. The 677 handles this like a pro by incorporating a modern SDR-based design for excellent signal-to-noise ratios and rejection even in the most challenging conditions. The 677 is simple to set up with front panel OLED menu and jog wheel, giving you access to 3 selectable tuners. In addition, a built-in web server provides expanded remote setup, operation control, and remote audio monitoring via internet stream. On the front of the 677, there's an LED bar meter to indicate audio output levels, a headphone jack, and LED alarm indicators for each receiver. There's a large OLED display and jog wheel with intuitive menus for easy setup of the 3 receivers and editing over all programming parameters.
Very nice. From Innovonics, the 677 Triple Tuner, available from Broadcasters General Store. And I always say they have sharp pencils and really nice people on the phone. You can call BGS, Broadcast General Store, at 352-622-7700. And their website is bgs.cc. Oh, I put a lot of effort into their website and into their back-end systems to make sure that you get the best price and you know when your delivery is going to be. They pay a lot of attention to that because they know it's important to you. Thanks a lot, Broadcast General Store, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Hey, it's Kirk Harnack, and Tom Ray is along. He is an ABIP inspector, and well, Tom's going over the changes that have occurred in the ABIP inspection program. The major one, I think, is Tom's involvement in writing standards, because the old checklist way out of date. Tom, what more can you tell us about the process of these standards, or maybe what's new in there, or what's significant? Does do station owners have access to this standards list, or is that something that you need to get your ABIP inspector out there to find out about?
No, actually, you actually need to be an SBE member to download the checklist. Okay. And this is something we had talked about as a committee. And the SBE was right. I mean, they, not only was there our time, and we're unpaid, we're volunteers. But every time we did something, and every time we came up with a draft, it had to go to legal before it went to the NAB, before it went to the FCC. And, the SBE had considerable expense put into this. So they said, you really should be an SBE member. So a lot of the Broadcasters Association have joined. And if you're an SBE member, you just go log in and just download the checklist. And there it is. If you go through that checklist, not only does it tell you that, let's use an example, your power on an AM station has to be between 90 and 105%. It references the rule, and it tells you why.
Oh, wow!
So you can actually go look at the rule yourself and go, okay, here's where it says that. Because I have had a couple of people say, well, where does it say that? Well, right here in the rule. Here's the rule.
Right here.
Oh, okay.
Good.
Well, and rightfully so. They want to make sure I'm not just going, pulling this off the top of my head. Not that there's much up there anymore, but so it references everything. We talk about the public file. We talk about your station authorizations, which are not required to be posted anymore, but they are on your online public file, and we do go through them. And for example, if you're a television station, you most likely have half a dozen microwave licenses for ENG, transmitter, and what have you. we want to make sure that they're correct. Are the antennas in the right place, geographic location? Are your antenna structure registrations correct? I went to a station at one point where I'm walking out to the tower with the chief engineer, and I'm looking at the ASR, and I'm looking up at the tower, and I'm looking at the ASR, and I went, they don't match. And he went, what do you mean they don't match? I said, it doesn't match. I said, according to the ASR, you are supposed to have a beacon and a side light and a side light, which is a tower over 350 feet.
Right.
And I said, what I'm looking at is a beacon and a side light, which is a tower under 350 feet. And he kind of looked, he says, well, the last guy who was doing these didn't say anything about that. I said, well, I picked it up. So, this is a problem. We have to find out. And thankfully, this station had a filing cabinet full of material from day one. And that tower had been up 30 years. It had originally it was supposed to be 360 feet, and they applied for the ASR for a 360-foot tower, which is beacon, side light. And for some reason, when they ordered the tower, they ordered a 330-foot tower, which changed the standard, but nobody changed the ASR.
Oh.
So technically, the tower was illegal because it didn't match the ASR. And they said, well, what can we do about it? I said, let me put you in touch. I know several consultants. Let me put you in touch with a consultant who charged them a minimal fee, who made a couple of calls to the FAA, and like a week later, a brand new ASR showed up. It was that easy of a change. It was an administrative change. It was a mistake. It happened.
Gotcha.
I had a station at one point. I use Google Earth. A lot of people use Google Earth, and that's acceptable, with the commission. And I'm looking for the tower on Google Earth, and it's like, there's no tower here. Where's the tower? So I expand it, and I pull back, and sure enough, there's the tower on the opposite side of the interstate, 1,500 feet away. And I'm like, no, that's not acceptable.
No. Oh no!
You're allowed 3 seconds deviation from where the tower is supposed to be located. Well, this tower had gone up in 1940, and that was the state of the art back then in that part of the country. This wasn't New York. This was a different part of the country, and that was the state of the art as far as location goes. I said to him, you gotta get this fixed, because your tower says it's over there. You're actually over here. And they said, it's been standing here since 1940. I'm like, yeah, you still got to get this fixed.
Wow.
So, wow. And I'll use a personal example. When I worked for Buckley Broadcasting, our station in Hartford, we had they expanded the building, so we took down the STL tower, and the town said, you're not putting up an STL tower again. Okay. So we took the STL dish and we hung it at the apex on the tower, on one of the AM towers. Not a problem. But of course, in doing that, you have to come up with the location and such. And what we found was that the towers had been put up in 1932 and 1934, respectively. According to the geographic location of the towers were supposed to be 1,000 feet south of where they were and straddling the street, which had been there since 18-something. So, for that one, because this was a directional, we had to go to the FAA and deconstruct the towers on paper and reconstruct the towers on paper at the new location, and then convince the commission we didn't do anything that would affect the directional. Really, we didn't move the towers. They're just standing there where they've been all along. It's not going to affect the proof.
Oh my goodness! Oh wow!
But this is what you run into if you have an old station, and I can pretty much tell when somebody has done some work on an antenna system before I go in and do an ABIP, because let's say it's a 4-tower directional and it's an inline. I'll pull it up on Google Earth, and there are all the ASRs lined up right in a row, right where the towers are, because they've recently went in and relocated the towers and made the changes. So, but when we walk in the door, we're your friends. We want to help. If you're an SBE member, download the checklist and start going through your station. You may find some interesting things. You might not, and you may think you're actually perfectly legal. and you're just this much out. You know, as Maxwell Smart used to say, just that much.
Hey, I've got the actually, while you were chatting, I downloaded all three guides, the AM, the FM, and the television one, and we will put links in the show notes. Now, I'm logged in as an SBE member on the SBE
Yep.
website, so I could just download it like that, but you do have to be logged
Right.
in to get those. But I'll provide the link
And
in
if you
the
look
show
through
notes.
it,
Yeah.
yeah, if you look through it, you'll find that it's based on the and the order of things in there is based on the original FCC checklist, but
Mhm.
we've expanded. We've expanded it quite a bit, and we think we've got a pretty thorough list, as did the NAB, as did the FCC. And as far as setting standards for the ABIP inspectors, what we're trying to do is standardize how people look at things. Like, for example, power on an FM. A lot of people nowadays use the power meter on the transmitter. I mean, Nautel and Gates Air, they set these to a standard at the factory, and they can be
Mhm.
used. But what happens if that power meter goes bad? Well, now we need to do EP times IP times F, so voltage times current times inefficiency factor, which becomes a little bit
Mhm.
difficult with a transmitter that changes its efficiency depending on the time of day. But you need to have a figure, so if that power meter goes out, you can at least say I'm in the ballpark. I'm real close.
Yeah.
So and
Look,
and that's what we need. What we don't want is an inspector walking into a station and assuming it's EP times IP times F when you're using the meter on the transmitter, because those two can be, or maybe you're using a bird watt meter in the rack. Those two can be
yeah,
off.
yeah, sure,
So
sure.
so we've been having those discussions lately.
Remind me and our audience, if you when you get an ABIP inspection and you pass that inspection, maybe you had a couple things to correct, but now you've passed that inspection. What are the benefits to the broadcaster by passing an inspection, whether it's you or a different ABIP inspector?
Well, the benefit is that the station. Somebody with a different set of eyes has looked at your station and gone through this checklist with which is based on FCC regulation, and
Mhm.
you can be pretty much assured that if the FCC were to knock on the door and say we're here to inspect, that they're not going to find much, if anything. Yeah, and that's our goal, to make sure that you're not going to get in trouble with the commission. And many times, it depends on who. Depends on the commission. Depends on the inspector they send out. You may say, look, I passed my ABIP last month, and he may go, okay, I'll leave, but let me look at your EAS logs just to make sure.
Okay, so if you pass an inspection, I thought that implied that you were not likely or going to be inspected by an FCC inspector unless there was a complaint or some other reason
Well,
for them to.
that was before. Right now, the FCC is kind of waffling on that because they've got the online public file, and
Mhm.
they've brought up with us the fact that in each state and each inspector does it a little bit different. So they're looking to get us standardized, in how we do it and what we look for and why we look for it and how we handle it if we find something off. Um, and then they'll probably go back to that. But at least this way, there's an assurance to the station, and if the commission does walk in, and chances are they're
Mhm.
probably only going to walk in if there's a problem, or if Washington said we want to make sure everybody's in compliance with EAS, go knock on doors. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
that will give them an assurance, if you can show them that certificate, that you are paying attention. You're doing what you're supposed to do. You passed this program, um, and chances are they're not going to be looking.
I,
But I do have an interesting FCC story to tell you when you're
sure,
ready.
sure. No, go ahead right now.
Okay.
Time.
Well, years ago there was a guy. He was out of the Boston office, and everybody in Connecticut and Massachusetts and Rhode Island and all of New England, everybody knew this guy. He was known to be tough, but he was fair, and he was actually a good guy, and we were all friends with him. And when he retired, there was a retirement party thrown, and he told a story about showing up at a station one day. And this was in the days before you could, run it on autopilot. And he showed up at the station, not a car in the parking lot, and he walks in, doors wide open, he walks right in, and nobody there. Calls out, nobody there. Walks around the station, nobody there. Okay, he went back out to his car for an hour. Nobody showed up. He walked back into the station, called out again, walked around again, nobody there. Walked into the transmitter room, did the readings, saw the keys to the dog. This is an AM. Saw the keys to the dog houses hanging by the door, walked out and did base currents. Came back in the building. Nobody there. Went back to his car for an hour. Came back in the building, called out, nobody there. Nobody there. So he walked into the transmitter room and he hit played off. And went back to his car for 2 hours. And then walked in the building and went played on again. And went back to his car. And 45 minutes later, a car pulls in. It's the general manager. So he introduces himself and shows his badge and the whole bit and says, do you have any problems today? Were you off the air at all? And the guy says, oh, no, everything's great. You better call your wife. You're going to be here for a while.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, my goodness. Well, I'll tell you, I got a comment, but I'll save it for after our last commercial break. Be ready for the tip of the week, Tom, and I'll have a comment. And got a great comment from Margaret Bryant. She made a comment on my Facebook page when I was promoting today's show.
Haven't talked to Margaret in years.
Isn't she awesome? She's just terrific.
She's a great lady.
Pet photography now, but yeah. Hey, our show's brought to you in part by Angry Audio and the Rave audio console from Angry Audio. This thing is so pretty. It's a little analog audio console. It has up to 8 stereo line inputs and up to 4 mic inputs. It has 2 output mix buses, 2 mix minus outputs with talkback on each of them, and flexible monitoring for the board operator. You can also control what the studio guests will be hearing, and they have talkback as well, plus automatic monitor muting, of course, when the mics are open. Crystal clear metering and tally lights, and the control surface is really gorgeous. It's machined and anodized aluminum, so the markings are all laser etched, and they never, ever wear out. You get easy installation with Studio Hub RJ45 connectors for your line inputs and outputs. You have XLR inputs for microphones, that's traditional, and a built-in power supply with no wall wart, mic and line remote logic, warning and user tally outputs for lighting on-air signs and enunciators, and you get preview or cue on every channel. Very smooth faders, avionics-style switches with LED illumination, and a sleek, low-profile desktop design. So check this thing out, the Rave console. It's an analog console from Angry Audio, and these things are shipping now. Good looking console. People are loving this thing. Thanks a lot, Angry Audio, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Hey, the other sponsor I want to tell you about is Max Connect. And, we've talked about the different, specific services and products that Max Connect does. But Max Connect also does complete broadcast technical solutions. They do engineering, and they do integration and connectivity solutions between studio, transmitter, different studios, that kind of thing. In other words, they can really consult with you. Let's say that you're in a market where, hey, maybe your contract engineer can take great care of the transmitter side, but is not up on a lot of the latest techniques and technologies. Well, Max Connect can find out what you need. You can talk to them about that. They can give you a plan and then implement that plan. They can do transmitter installation, of course, transmitter side upgrades, tower services they're offering, grounding installation and upgrades, and so many stations need to have that grounding right. Site monitoring and control. They're really good at designing a remote control solution for you for monitoring. Due diligence inspections. Maybe you're selling, maybe you're buying. They do NRSC measurements. They also have streaming services. So if you need to stream your radio station, or maybe you're not happy with your current streaming supplier, well, they do streaming services at Max Connect. And they also do automation, installation, and setup. This is a complicated process for a lot of folks, and Max Connect makes this easy. You can check them out, all the services that they offer, the things that your station needs, and maybe you're having a hard time getting, maxconnect.com. It's MAXXKONNECT, maxconnect.com. We'll have a link in the show notes, and you can talk to Josh Bone if you need to. Josh is a good friend of mine, and a fabulous engineer, and he's got a whole team of excellent engineers that take care of these services for you. Thanks a lot, Max Connect, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. We're with Tom
Now, wait a
Ray
minute.
here talking.
Wait a minute.
What?
You said on that Angry Audio console that the etching will not wear off. Hey, Mike Dosh, challenge accepted. Send me one.
Well, I'm sure he'll sell you one, and then you can try it. So, hey, real quick, I got this note from Margaret Bryant. She says, I remember one time I got inspected. I happened to be wearing at this radio station. She said, I was wearing a skirt and a jacket that day. Unusual for me, she says. The FCC inspector asked to see the chief engineer, and I came down to greet him. Well, he looked me up and down and said, well, that's different. I knew everything was in good order, but this was not a good start. Long story, but he was actually pretty, he was petty about some things. Petty is what Margaret says. The transmitter site was so clean, you could just about eat off the floor. And when he saw that, he actually changed his tune. He didn't know that Margaret was working with the FCC engineer in charge of the district on some FEMA issues. Okay. They apologized to me and all was good. Later, the inspector called me for help on other problems. I guess he realized that I was okay after all. So
You bet.
good on you, Margaret Bryant.
Exactly.
Oh,
when I walk into a station, I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's male, female. I don't care what race, what color, whatever. You're the engineer. I'm here to help. Let's rock and roll. That's we're all human beings. So
I'll put links to download these checklists. The link to the page where you do that, but you have to be logged in. Tom, do you have any parting thoughts for us before we have to go?
well, yeah, something that not necessarily related to the ABIP, but could be. A lot of stations, a lot of station owners don't like to pay for tower work or tower inspections, and I understand. They're expensive. If you sit down and talk to a tower guy nowadays, some of the things they're up against, the cost of insurance, the cost of their equipment, it's up there. They have to charge what they're charging, and OSHA regulations. They can't just send one guy out to climb the tower anymore. It's usually a team of three. So I had a station recently that in January, the area they're in, they're in an area where they don't really, it's windy, but they don't get hurricane force winds, and they had hurricane force winds. And about a month ago, they had almost hurricane force winds come through with really heavy driving rain, and all of a sudden they ended up off the air. So now, it's located at a television transmitter site. So I talked to the TV engineer, and he kind of opened up the connector at the bottom and didn't see any water. This was an air line. So he put the thing back together, and we called a tower crew, and they went up, and what they found was that two of the four bolts on the connector were attached to the antenna had loosened up. And this was, the antenna did not need to be pressurized, so it had a gas block there. But the water forced itself, because of the loose bolts, it forced itself above the gas block and shorted the antenna. It shorted the transmission line.
Wow.
So they took it apart and dried it out and opened the top of the antenna to make sure, and it was dry up there. Put it back together, SWR 1.05 to 1.
Wow.
So it pays to have the stuff looked at and the bolts tightened, because it loosened up just enough. And up at 400 feet up the tower, that wind was different, and the rain was driving harder up there, and it drove it right into the flange.
Wow.
So,
interesting.
Talk to the general manager. You gotta do that. And I've also had a satellite dish once where, they told me they had no satellite signal. I showed up and it was 90 degrees out because the wind had grabbed it. And I know for a fact that thing was locked in place. I couldn't move it. And 2 weeks later, the thing's looking this way instead of where it's supposed to be. And I was like, and I grabbed it. It was like I never tightened it. I grabbed the thing and pulled it right back into position. It was like, are you kidding me? So that's what wind does.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And especially up high, wind can really ravage and rattle and shake things loose. Tom, I appreciate you being with us on this ABIP program. We'll have links in the show notes to give you guys more information about the ABIP program and how it can really help you. You'd rather be inspected by a friend than inspected by somebody who can write you a big old fine. So get that taken
big
care
time.
of.
And it's money well spent. It's money well spent to have that assurance that if the commission were to walk in, you're going to be just fine.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Tom, thank you for being with us. Appreciate you taking time and your experience going into these checklists and you sharing that with us here today. Hey, we got to go. I want to thank Suncast for producing today's show. Thank you very much. We've got another, of course, wonderful show coming up next week. And if you give me just a second, I will make sure. Oh, yeah. Next week, we're going to check out some incredible new studios that are still under construction right now. They're not finished yet. We're going to try to look at one that's mostly finished, and we're going to see how these gorgeous studios, and I mean, money ain't a big object here. These are some really pretty studios, and there's some construction techniques and ideas for the furniture that I think you're going to really appreciate. It's coming up next week. I'm going to keep it a secret as to where we're going to be. Secret location, okay? And we got to go. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.